Buenos nachos and welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been here before, you've been missing out. On today's episode, we're going to be working on this guy. It is a PlayStation 5 digital and it has a damaged HDMI port. So we're going to go ahead and take care of that. And of course, we're going to spare you the opening of the PlayStation 5 just because many people have a how to open video on that. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. And now that we have the console completely disassembled down to the board, we can go ahead and take a look at the HDMI port damage. So the traces look fine. I mean, we knew this was going to be bad. Let's just take a look and see how bad the damage really is here. As you can tell, the left-hand side on this thing is just completely busted off. We'll start by adding our low melt solder, which is this stuff right here. Of course, we'll add some flux and turn on our fan. I'll go ahead and add a little bit of flux to this side. Well, look at that. There's a tiny capacitor right there. That'll make things a little bit more challenging. Probably going to have to use our finer tipped soldering iron for that. Now, let's begin. And of course, we'll probably have to sit on this for a little while, because I don't expect this to just slide out easily, even with the low melt solder. Came out just like pulling out a tooth. Let's go ahead and clean up all this old solder. Be using desoldering wick for this, I believe. Unless, of course, it fails me, then we'll go ahead and use our desoldering gun over there. And we want to be careful around that diode. Usually don't get lucky enough to where these clean up on their first go through one side of the board. This area has a large ground plane, so I'm not at all surprised that it's soaking up the heat. We have our replacement HDMI port right here. We'll begin by adding some new solder to the traces here, or to the pads in this case. We'll add some flux. That cap moved on me. We'll get that out of there in a minute. And I'm afraid that would happen, but that's not the end of the world. We'll adjust that here in a minute. We're going to use hot air to put the HDMI port back on. While we're waiting for the temperature to rise, that HDMI port was in pretty bad shape, as you can tell. And we'll use some tweezers to poke the capacitor back into place. I mean, right now it's fine, but I'd just rather it be correct. Perfect. Alright, next let's go ahead and add our HDMI port, especially now that this thing's a little warm. It'll make it a tad bit easier to get this thing working properly. So let's make sure this thing is aligned. Just make the process a whole lot easier. You want to make sure this is as flush as possible. And then I'm putting a little bit of extra solder on there as I want this thing to be reinforced. As another guy says on the YouTubes, this way it's better than factory. I just wanted to make sure that the heat penetrates the entire thing, that way the solder can go through the board. Let's go ahead and double check that that indeed did happen, sorta. So let's go ahead and add some solder to this side as well. Alright, those look like pretty good joints to me. So we'll go ahead and go back to the top. We're going to go ahead and solder these legs onto the board. These guys right here. We'll go ahead and switch to our finer tipped soldering iron, because that big one isn't going to get around that capacitor. Get it nice and zoomed in there for you folks at home. And I don't usually do this, but I think today I'm going to use some top heat from our hot air. It should just aid in the process of making this solder flow a little bit easier, because this little tip can't handle it. I'm just dragging all the excess over to the corner so when I use a desoldering wick, it'll be a little bit easier. I'm really struggling with that one. Looks like I'm going to need the hot air again, which I guess is a good thing, because I'll just use that to reattach that capacitor while I'm here. There it goes. It was being mighty difficult there. Geez, caused me to melt the port. I guess before we progress, let's make sure that there isn't any damage to the port. Looks like it's in immaculate condition. I just wish this board didn't suck up so much heat, but I guess that would be why you'd want to use a bottom heater to see if we have any shorts. Clean up all this excess flux. Yeah, that's just my soldering iron over there, melting things. Let's go ahead and check these pins real quick and make sure everything's attached. And yeah, it all looks good. I really don't like how this came out, but it is soldered on. You should also make sure that both sides of that capacitor are adhering, so I'll add just a tiny bit of solder to it. And for this port here, that plastic just makes me question everything. Yeah, that one looked questionable. Yeah, that's much better. That makes me a lot more confident in this repair. Let's go ahead and use a can of air. That's looking pretty good. And the other side is fairing out quite well as well. Let's do one final check with the multimeter to make sure none of these legs are bridging together. It's just the ones in question. which were the ones on this very corner. And then of course these. Yeah, we're all good. I say this main board is ready to go back into the main console, and then we can go to testing. All right, we're gonna turn this on and see how it goes. Well, looks like we're getting picture. And there we have it. If you enjoyed the video, if you thought it was helpful or useful to you, please remember to leave us a like and subscribe. Until next time.